Good evening. I'm Socrates, Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. We believe digital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. When We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Good evening and welcome to Socrates Garrett Live, that has now changed and become Doc and Sock. You know, we had to change the name to Doc and Sock because we were getting so many calls about who is this Dr. Henderson? Who is this guy and where did he come from? And so I said, well, if our listening and viewing audiences out there are going to keep asking questions about him, then let's get him up on the same platform with me. And so we're now Doc and Sock, and we'll get some graphics out on that a little bit later on. But now you're watching We Believe Digital Broadcasting Network from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, an African-American owned and operated broadcasting studio. Let me repeat that. It's African-American owned and operated. A lot of times we see that others in our community tell our story, and they share and chronicle and archive the things about black folk that they want to share and archive. And so when history is told, we're often left out. And that's because we didn't have a hand in the creation of history. And we're going to deal with the importance of history during this show this evening. Now, if you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to share this program with your friends and family. Send us stars. If you're watching us on YouTube, we want you to subscribe to the program. We're in the middle of a subscription campaign. Our numbers are really jumping. We are now eligible for partnership with YouTube. And it's critically important that we become a partner with them because they, in fact, have been more instrumental in creating wealth in the African-American-owned community than any other business. And so we look forward to that partnership with them. Now, if you're watching us on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com, who is in the middle of a remake at the moment. We're working with GoDaddy out there, one of the largest hosting services in the country, and we're trying to get the website to be exactly the way you've indicated you wanted it to be. You see, we are a platform. When you go there, you'll see lots of categories because we have a lot of diversity. You'll see inspiration. If you click on the inspiration, you can see and hear some of the best preaching in the world. My Bishop Ronnie Cruder, is sought after all over the country, serves on the Tellus board. He's always in Israel. He's always over there trying to find a way to reach some peace agreement in that part of the country. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in our show as well. But now if you check on sports, then you can keep up with what is Deion saying now. A lot of people are saying that Deion was too aggressive in his proclamation that he was the greatest of all time and that he was coming and that the world would never seen anything like that. And he started out exactly that way with a 4-0 beginning and some of the most heroic and entertainment come from behind victories that I've ever seen. And then he fell on hard times and went 0-8 for the next 8 games. Now, some says that he should have been more humble in the very beginning, and he wouldn't have to deal with the naysayers that have said that it was fake in the very beginning and that its program is not that solid. If you click on sports, you'll get that kind of information. If you scroll down further, you'll see the internet radio station, WBLV, We Believe Radio. This is We Believe Broadcasting Network. That's We Believe Radio. And if you listen there, you'll hear programs like this one with Dr. Henderson and myself come on each day, Monday through Friday, from 10:20 in the morning for Socrates, Garrett Live, and 11:20 every weekday, Dr. Henderson, Organize, Don't Criticize. You'll also hear some great Southern soul with Jay Boogie down of Florida that runs our morning show for us, and some of the best soul music that you ever want to hear. Later in the evenings on Wednesdays and Fridays, you'll hear my good friend Herman Taylor. I knew Herman's father had one of the best radio voices in the whole world. I mean, he had the best voice ever. And his son now has a show on We Believe on Wednesdays called Wind Down Wednesdays, and on Fridays as well. So you see, we're a little bit different kind of a deal. You know, it's not about my page, about your page. It's about building a network, and that's what we strive to do here at We Believe. Now, we could use some help. What we're trying to do is very ambitious, and quite frankly, it has not been done by anyone that we know of at this time. And we look at all of the folk that are supporting black agendas, but they're not supporting black-owned businesses. So when I listen to the Black News Information Network over on Hallelujah 95.5 every day for the Black Information Network, they claim, and I know they have, some of the largest corporations in the world sponsoring that program, like Bank of America, etc. And we're not hating on that. What we're saying is, if we're going to invest in black information, let's invest in black information brought to you by black-owned businesses. You know, I grew up as a boy going to a club in Canton, Mississippi called Johnny T's. And I thought Johnny T was a black-owned club. And it was 20 years later that I realized that Johnny T didn't own the club, that some white person owned it, and he was there, the face of it, and all of the economic benefits went back into the white community. And so, you know, we don't want that to continue to happen over here. We want Black Information Network to team with We Believe. Let's help build black-owned and operated media. Now, I was talking to Chris Williams today, one of the anchor writers for the Mississippi Link newspaper, and he indicated to me that black-owned media gets less than 4% of the advertising dollars that are spent in this country. That's less than 4% of the advertising dollars. And while African Americans represent over 10% of the population in the USA, in a state like Mississippi, we represent almost 50% of the population. So you would think that if your ambitions and your goals and your objectives were to assist black-owned media, that our phone here at We Believe Studios would be ringing off the hook. But it's not. And one of the things I often recall is Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail. He said it's not the bad folk in the world that he's concerned about. It's the appalling silence of good folk. It's the lack of help from good folk. So Bloomberg, if you're listening out there, if somebody gets this message to you, it's a wonderful thing to put money in Alcorn State University, Jackson State University, but you need to invest in black-owned businesses. And I would provide all of the information that you might need to demonstrate to you that We Believe Digital is a good fit for your organization. Now, as always, it's great to have my co-host here with Doc and Sock. Dr. Eldridge Henderson. How have you been, sir?
Doing fine, sir. Thank you.
Good. Tell us a little bit about what's happened to you this week.
Well, nothing too different, just a lot of hard work. I had a television show earlier. We were talking about the scholarships that are available in the United States and the world for all students. We found that there's an organization that has over 600,000 scholarships for students that are juniors and currently they have over $1 billion available, and all one has to do is apply for it.
Wow.
All kinds of different categories. You need about a 2.5 to 4.0 plus average to get one of those scholarships. But the problem with some is that one has to fill out, make an essay. That has been holding a lot of people back from scholarships. And my thing is, if you don't know how to write a good essay, if you're in school, you just have to learn to do it or get a tutor and let that tutor help you write one. And the other thing that I've been advising people about these scholarships is if you don't know exactly whether you qualified or not, you start looking at scholarships when you're in the 7th grade and find out what the requirements are to get one when you finish high school. And by the time you're in the 9th grade, you'll be headed towards that scholarship because you know to take the SAT test and other college entry tests, even though they are not as significant as they used to be. You will know to have a 4-point average, and on and on. You will also know to involve yourself in extracurricular activities and volunteer services in the community. All of that's part of that essay that you need to know how to put together.
And I believe you have an organization that can assist with that. What's it called?
It's called Action Leadership Institute. And we help people with that kind of information. We help them to start businesses, get that famous 501c3 from the IRS so they can get grant money. And then we teach them how to write their own grants. Instead of paying somebody $5,000 or $10,000, we teach a person with at least 3rd grade ability to a PhD to learn to write his or her own grant. We've been doing it for years. And
How can people reach you?
They can call us at 601-201-1957. The company's name is Action Leadership Institute, or they can email us at clu369@gmail.com. Folks, you need to take advantage of opportunity. You just heard Mr. Socrates talking about big companies may or may not be sending their funds to black communication outlets. That is a fact. And what usually happened, Mr. Socrates, people that had money don't want to invest in areas where they are going to create their own narrative. The big money people want to give their money to people that's going to say something that's positive about them all the time and write the history and record it in their publication.
Well, Doc, we've gotten in trouble with that, and many of us now are beginning to question the motives of even King James. We go back now to the very beginning of history and from the banks of the Nile, and we are really searching now for truth as it relates to history, not only of African Americans, but everybody else's history as well. But Doc, this show deals with some issues that others dare not tackle. So let's get right into it.
Let's do it.
We had a mass shooting up in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I saw on the news the 4 students that were gunned down. 14, 2 17, 1 16 years old, and they were all white students. Doc, what is the white boy mad about? Why is he acting out this way? Why are they killing people through mass shootings all across this country?
Well, it's not simple. It's complicated. And my research shows that there are a lot of different reasons for that. Many of the white, you believe it or not, millions of them, are not much better off than the poor Hispanics or the poor black people. They don't have a 2-family household. Many of them are economically poor. Many of their parents don't have what we call livable wage skills. And many of them are separated or divorced. Many are raised by their grandparents. And those young white people are not familiar with that kind of thing. They know that their fathers, their grandfathers had good jobs. Many were with unions and others were with organizations that paid a steady salary, and mom didn't have to work. So they are in a bad situation. And then they see some of their white peers at the same school that have parents have the ability to get them tutoring and go to summer camps and learn all kinds of things, get accepted to some of the state universities and colleges, and they can't. Many of those guys and girls can't even get into local community colleges because they don't have that early training and initiation to do that. So they get mad, they get sick, they get mean, and they start shooting and killing. And people say then they need to go and talk to a psychiatrist. But if my son would do the same, they would even think about a psychiatrist. They say that boy need to be given to the state and let him put him in the gas tank.
So let's deal with it for a minute. You seem to be saying that white gentlemen creating this kind of chaos in America is coming from the poor class. How many classes are there in the white community?
Well, they have the upper class, which include all those big boys and millionaires and so forth, and they have the middle class and the lower class.
And so you think that the perpetrators of these violent crimes are coming out of the poor class?
The poor and the lower middle class. That's where most of them come from. If you check them out, you will find that if they do have a mother and a father in the house, they are dysfunctional. One parent that they were looking for him after a big mass murder, and they was trying to disappear. They finally caught him. Had one just sentenced to life, a young boy. He did some killing when he was 15. Now he's 17, and the judge, I believe today or yesterday, gave him life in prison without parole. So these things are going to get worse in America and the world, and it's going to create a lot of tension, and that's why we're going to have the new man, new policies, and new strategies that's going to be moving from the status quo and have people with the ability to provide leadership, correct problems before they get chaotic, and do some things that's going to keep peace and harmony and make sure they have laws that's going to protect the general welfare of the average citizen.
Now, I've been told by many that I've had an opportunity to visit with that the white man in Mississippi was different than the white man up north. That the white person in Mississippi during the period of slavery was more brutal or more violent, would do things that white folk in the north and the east would not do. And now I'm hearing you say that the violence is coming out of the poor class or the lower class of whites. So is Mississippi a place that historically finds itself on the bottom and have more crimes and more violence now? I looked at the statistics the other day, and it says that Mississippi is the second most dangerous state in the country, second to only Louisiana. Is there a correlation then between the classes that are in Mississippi? Are all Mississippi white folk members of the poor class and very few members of the upper class?
No, not at all. We have a large portion of the white people, or what I call middle class and upper class. The problem they have to deal with is those lower class whites that they don't like themselves. I've heard a lot of them say it. They talk about them like a dog when they're talking to white folks. Now, I don't know whether that's being pretentious or not, but that's the way they do it. I mean, when they're talking about their own kind, and those bad ones when they're talking to black people. I've been hearing this for about 50 years. But of course, we are always worse than any poor white person in the world in the same words of that person that would be talking about his own people.
Now, Doc, I get that. And I heard someone say that there is no white person in the world that would trade places with you, regardless to his situation and status today. No white man in the world would trade places with you.
Well, I wouldn't blame him. Black people throughout the history of America and I would say since the 1500s, have been living in what I call a constant hell, economically, politically, socially, lack of leadership, and all other areas you can identify. And I wouldn't think white folks would want to be treated that way. For instance, we were in slavery for almost 500 years, legal slavery, and then this so-called quasi-legal slavery after that. And I guarantee you the average black white person you could find today, if you would put him, and I told you this a few months ago, put him in slavery and give him the same courtesies that the black folks received, they would commit suicide in about 6 months. And we endured it generation after generation for almost 500 years, including the so-called Jim Crow era that lasted very outwardly until the 1960s and thereafter up until today.
Well, it sounds like you're saying that the only somebody that would subject themselves to the treatment and the conditions that we did during slavery is African Americans. You're saying that white folks would not have tolerated, they would have just died off. And you're saying that the American Indian, whom we can't find today, he wouldn't subject himself to slavery. So black folks are the only one that would succumb to that.
The only one in the history of the world during the last 500 or 600 years. Every other group would fight.
Wow.
Now, there were a few exceptions in the black community. Wow. The blacks in Haiti took over that country. They beat some of the strongest military powers during their era.
Blacks in Haiti.
That's right. And then that was so shocking until a lot of the people, and I've read the history where some of them gave up and decided to leave and move to Canada and other places, moved to the north. They were so afraid of black folks, they said, we have to get together and get these black folks under control. And that's when they put all of those in-laws together that said black people are totally segregated. They can't move together in no more than groups of two, and they better not be talking then. On and on. Matter of fact, I just happened to read that today again. I've read it off and on for 50 years. There were over 400 different things that black folks couldn't do in America, and some of those things have not been outlawed yet.
Doc, we're up against a hard break, and we're going to come back and continue this conversation. I don't believe that black folk were just sheep-like. I believe there was something else that go on that allowed us to succumb ourselves to slavery. We're going to deal with it when we come back after this commercial. Stay tuned.
Are you dreaming? Becoming an entrepreneur, but you're not sure where or how to start? At Entrepreneurs Academy 101, our online program will guide you step by step on how to start and grow your own business. We offer courses such as how to write a business plan, how to create a budget, and so much more. Our online training program is designed for you to learn at your own pace, and there's no set order to complete this program. Because our academy is online, you have the choice to learn with a group, with friends, or individually. Upon completion of the entire curriculum, you will receive a certificate of achievement to acknowledge that you have completed the training needed to become a successful entrepreneur. So enroll today to design the life that you love. Contact your entrepreneur coach, Brenda Myers, at 601-672-0695 or visit our website at www.entrepreneursacademy101.com for more information.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Welcome back to Doc and Sock. You know, if you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to share this program with your friends and family. You can call us at 800-492-5186. 800-492-5186. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, we want you to subscribe to the program. It's critically important. If you're watching us on our very own network, our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com, we want you to share the program with your friends and family and look around and see the difference between a page and a network. You know, we're black owned and operated right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the belly of the beast, in the poorest country in the world. Let me make that. I'm not sure if we're poorer than some parts of Asia or some parts of Africa. I'm not sure if we're the poorest there. But in America, we are the poorest state in America. Let me make sure I put it that way. And when you are African American in the poorest state in America, your challenges are almost insurmountable. I mean, the opportunities are so few for you to get things right, and you put in place a criminal justice system that has not been fair to African Americans in a state where slavery and bigotry and racism was just the everyday norm. Then you can see what we're trying to do begs for you to get involved, to assist us in many ways. Now, my co-host, a gentleman that was born on a plantation, has grown up to be Dr. Eldridge Henderson, one of the most sought after speakers and orators in this country today. I call him a dangerous man because he's born on that plantation and somehow he escaped. Somehow he got off of it. And today he's raising a boatload of hell. And I'm sure white folk were saying that we should have taken care of that long time ago and we wouldn't have to be dealing with him today. But they didn't, and he escaped, and he's here on this show. Doc, how have you been again?
Well, I've been well. I've been doing well. And let's get back to this so-called escape. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I had a serious problem when I was coming up on that plantation. The white folks were doing everything they could to look out for my welfare. When I finished the 8th grade, they had already given me a job where I would be making $2 a day. They defined my responsibilities to bale hay, fix the fence, and do anything else they told me. Then they told me, and I done told this true story many times, when I turned 16, I could get me a wife. They said, we have a lot of girls, you know, they didn't call them young ladies, all around the community. You go down there and get you one. Because some of the parents had 8 and 10, 15 children. And the rule was, when you got your little house, which they would give you, you had your guaranteed job, $2 an hour, and when you got that new wife, which you didn't have to marry, you could then go to the local town and get a used car and get that car and let them take it out of your $2 a day every week. And that's what I wanted to do. And I had agreed to do it. My parents had agreed to do it because that was the end of my education in the 8th grade. And something happened. The same people that were supervisors in Hinds County passed a law and created a black high school in Clinton, Mississippi called Sumner Hill High School, and all the poor farm plantation boys and girls and the few that lived on their own land had an opportunity to go to high school in Hinds County, not worry about the 1 or 2 high schools they had in Jackson, which we couldn't afford to go through. So that ruined my life because my parents wouldn't let me keep my job. They say I couldn't go and get Susan Q's daughter down the road, and I would not get that used car. I said, boy, you going to school. See what happened when folks do something for you? So all I'm telling you and others is, you have to take advantage of opportunities, even if you don't have enough sense to know what's good for you. My parents could have allowed me to continue to keep that job, marry Susan Q's daughter, get that used car, and I would have been just like some of the men and women that's living on that same plantation a day. The same plantation, they have higher wages now. They pay the minimum wage. They still have their house. They have to pay a little rent now because many of them are old and sick and retired, so they pay a little rent out of Social Security. When you get Social Security, you have to pay a little rent. Man, that helped me, but my parents say, son, you got to do better.
Now, Doc, I'm appreciative of that story.
But I didn't want to do better. I rebelled against it. And my dad, who was a strong man, Say, son, I don't want you to work like me. You know, I'm working 3 and 4 jobs every day to feed you all. There were 6 of us. Man, it was tough, but I didn't know it was tough, man.
Well, Doc, I get that, but I don't get that as it relates to Pookie today. The young man that I see walking the streets of Jackson in these urban ghettos where they are 9 and 10 years old with their pants down below their butt and with Uzis and AK-47s in their hand. I don't know if Pookie got a chance to get that escape route.
He doesn't because Pookie does not have, in most cases, a permanent mother in the house. He or she probably have never seen the father. They have seen a lot of men in and out. And then, in many instances, the mother is under 35, so she is still out there courting and looking, trying to improve her economic and social status in the community. The old grandmother is about 45. The great-grandmother is about 60. And they just interchange and send those kids from one place to another. They might live here for a week or two, weekend here, there, in another place, all around, move from school to school. During an 8-year period, might move to 5 or 6 different schools. So those guys and girls cannot make themselves understand the significance of being a good person. They don't see much good. Now that sounds bad, but that is pervasive among most of the type of young people that I'm talking about because I've worked with many of them for years.
So are you saying that Pookie would have been better off having been born on a plantation?
Well, I'm not going to say he was born on a plantation, but I guarantee you he would have been better off if he had a stable mother and father in the same house where all of them worked and set guidelines for old Pookie to do chores, at least go to school and pass. My dad would tell us, you have to pass or something's going to happen to your behind. And it was a rhyme. I'm not going to say it. And to pass in our house at the time, you had to make A, B, C, or D. So my job was to pass, to keep from getting that what we call that lovable whipping that he was going to get. But now, if he knew that I had to be an honor student and told me that, I would have been an honor student during those early years. You see, it all depends on the direction you have and what your parents know and what they want to do. Oh, Dad and Mom didn't have any education, but they say, son, y'all children got to do a little better. And that's what I was telling you the other day. Your kids, my kids, and many other kids, not working as hard as we are today and have less.
What happened to them?
Because you, I'm going to have to say you, and your kind, decided to give them too much. You didn't demand that they learn certain skills. You had a business and you didn't demand that all of them go and get a degree in some type of business administration, finance, or communication skills, or accounting, something to that effect. You let them do what they wanted to do. They went to school and changed the majors 2 or 3 times, dropped out 1 or 2 times, married, divorced, separated, and all kinds of things. And then the parents, the so-called middle-class parents, that worked like a slave the rest of his life, and many of them are still alive, just continue to pay that car note for them, help with that rent, help with that house that they bought that they couldn't afford. Because time they separated or divorced, when half of that check left, they had to either borrow money from the parents, which they're not going to pay back, or move and come back to you. And most of us would rather help those youngsters stay away from us if we had to pay their rent or the house note for 6 months.
Now, Doc, I get what you're saying. I'm just sitting here listening and reflecting and recalling some things. My sisters couldn't even have company until they were 16, 17 years old. And the young man could come to the house and then an adult be sitting right there looking at them.
That's the way it's supposed to be. It ought to be that way today.
Now, they were 16 years old and they couldn't have company.
I will say again, it ought to be that way today. And I bet all those girls did something productive. They finished school, had some kind of livable wage skill, and even though they might have been married 2 or 3 times, when they married 2 or 3 times, they got someone that was similar in their education and skill base. even though they might not last for a whole marriage.
So I don't know how we get back there. Let's go back and take a look at it. You came off the plantation and you just walked us through how you matriculated through Sumner Hill, et cetera, and on to college. In 1973, affirmative action kicked in, and that's where the federal government and the good white folk, are different than the white folk that are members of the middle and poor classes of white folk. And we're going to have to really get to understand the difference in white people, because if we can really understand the difference in them, then we won't go around trying to say all white people are bad or all white people hate us. Maybe we need to identify the ones that do and the ones that don't.
Right. There's never good to use the word all when you're talking about anything, human or non-human.
Right. So we were the benefits of affirmative action. So when I came out of Alcorn State University and graduated in 1968, went into the Army, did my due responsibility there to fight for this country, came back out of there, and in 1973 I went to work for Xerox Corporation and moved on up the ladder through affirmative action, because they were recruiting black folk in 1973. And we moved in the middle class. Now, what do we do for our children, Doc? We pushed them into integration. And so instead of them being trained now by you and I, we gave them over to white folk to train.
Well, that's what they wanted. And you see what happened to them, don't you?
No, I'm not exactly sure exactly what role integration played in the standard of living that they enjoy today. They don't seem to be doing as well, even though they had an opportunity to go to better schools per se.
Well, the better school doesn't mean anything if you don't get the same training the top tier students get at that same school. Now, if you go to the so-called integrated school, anywhere in the South, North, East, or West, in most cases, the black kids or the kids of color going to be in what we call general education, driver's education, shop, or whatever, and they are not going to be given the same training and advancement opportunities that the white middle class and upper kids will get in the same school. They are not going to be part of the same club. The only group that you would have the blacks with that's consistent with their ability would be football, basketball, or track during those times. Many schools today, you couldn't find a black person on the tennis team. I'm talking about 2023. Couldn't find a black person on the swim team. On and on and on. And if you do, they are looked at as an oddity. And I was looking at the information about this black family that had two daughters on the swim team. They disqualified them because of certain characteristics of the students. And they were winners, scholarship prone. We're not going to get into that. It makes me mad when I think about it. Those are some of the opportunities that we have that is not being used in a manner that's going to be productive for our future.
Now, Doc, we kind of work through some things. Now, you showed statistics the other day that 73% of the Republicans supported the war in Israel, and 36% of the Democrats supported the war, just almost reverse. Why is it such a difference in white folk when it comes to war in Israel and when it comes to African Americans?
Well, it's very simple. If you look at the research and the history, you will find that Republicans have a tendency to have more economic status. I mean, they're representatives and senators, and more connections, stronger connection than the white senators and members in the House. They have big donors that will give them all kinds of money for their campaigns that, you know, have what I call the Jewish background. They have wonderful opportunities to do speeches for $35,000 to $150,000 a year. Their kids can get big college universities and internships, and then good jobs at foundations and government and private agencies when they finish. and they have similar operations for the Democrats. But mostly the Democrats pretend they are for the common man, and the Jews and others that don't care anything about the common man, they look at the upper class and the middle class up, I would say.
Well, let's talk about that. Are the Republicans mostly coming out of the middle class of white folk, or the poor class, or upper class?
Well, if you look at the individuals today and read their bios, you'll find that they were middle, upper middle, and rich during their childhood. They went to the best colleges and universities. They worked for the best companies that they could find. Many of them were military guys that went to ROTC, Officers Candidate School, or when they graduated from their college, they were commissioned as a second lieutenant. They went to the war and didn't get themselves killed, and they came back as heroes. Johnny Booker, that you've been talking about, he might have been a college graduate, and he went to the war, and he went in as a private. He couldn't get in OCS, Officers Candidate School, whether he was qualified or not, because that was a quota. You couldn't have but 3 or 4 in any one class. But that white boy that had a college degree, he was automatically given a commission as a second lieutenant because his daddy knew the senator, and on and on and on, and that boy had to be taken care of. And he was not going to Vietnam, for instance, during my era, unless he wanted to. He would get a job as a trainer at one of the American bases in the United States, or send him to Germany or some other place, in most cases.
Well, it's so kind of confusing because go back and we already declared that there is no white boy in America that would trade places with you. I don't care what his condition is.
I agree.
He would not trade places with you today. Now that's saying something right there about who you are and about who he thinks he is.
That's right.
So
I could break him in 6 months, where it took over 600 years to break the black folks. I would just say, I'm going to change your color, like I've seen a few deals in books and a film or two. And your name is going to change from Robert Philip Weinstein to John Philip. And you are not going to stay anywhere but in the ghetto with me, in this rundown ghetto apartment, where you have to fight those rats and roaches, where the garbage is not picked up but once a month, and they don't pick it all up then, where you might have to sleep on the floor half of the time because them cousins of mine shooting up in the house, drug dealers on every corner, prostitutes on the others, and you find that people are moving around, working 2 and 3 jobs, can't raise the children, and when they get home, the kids are not at home, they're out trying to make a little living. The girls slipping out of the windows at night. Boy, I've seen it happen for years. I've lived in the ghetto and non-ghetto and all over the place in many different states most of my life.
well,
And seen it all.
You think that the white boy would lose his self-esteem, and the white's privilege would leave his body, his
It'll leave
DNA?
his body, his mind, it'll stay in the DNA, but he will be so mentally unwell, many of them would commit suicide
Wow.
or get on drugs.
Wow.
And that same is happening to the blacks in that area, but most of them are afraid to commit suicide because that religion they had been giving these black folks taught them many years ago that you don't commit suicide, son, because you will go to hell when you die. Black folks have always been afraid to go to hell when they die. I never could understand it after I passed 10 years of age.
Well, let's ask a question about that. Religion plays a tremendous role in everything that goes on in America. Are people, both black and white, first of all, is there an upper class in the black community?
Oh, yes, yeah.
There is an upper class.
There is an upper class. A lot of people don't know it.
Okay.
They're
Boy, I tell you, time flies, Doc. We got to work with just a little bit before we have to go. There's an upper class in the black community and an upper class in the white community.
But there's a difference in the economic position, right? The upper class black person might have what you call a good job, making from $85,000 to $125,000 a year as a mid manager. The white boy in the upper class, he's making $125,000 to $325,000 a year, and he is a senior vice president or the corporate president of a big company, a Fortune 500 company. And this black man is usually working for him, doing most of the work, giving him the studies, giving him the reports, and all he has to do is read the talking points and make a decision and give it back to his underlings, and they would carry it out.
Doc, we got to go on. We got so much to get to because I want to understand if the upper class whites produce leaders that are fairer and more understanding of the black condition, or is it the coming out of the middle class, these middle managers, are they harder on minorities?
I would tell you right now, you don't have to go any further, they are harder. My experience of 50 years is that those middle managers are harder. They are bad as these old black managers that's a little higher than middle. You're not going to find too many that will promote a black person up to his ability level by giving him a fair opportunity to rise in the company.
Okay. And so Mississippi probably didn't have many upper class whites. It probably had middle class and lower class whites.
That's right.
And so they were harder on blacks in Mississippi than folk in Massachusetts were.
Of course, because the lower class, the lower middle class, and the lower class whites didn't have any what I call leadership making ability. They did the work. They stood over the black and kept them in the hole. They were in the police force. They were the people that did all the so-called supervisory work over the black person.
Well, now
I know we don't have time. We need to get back on this later on.
We do, and because of a couple more points that we're going to develop later on, and that is it the mulattoes that we see in Mississippi and other places, are they being produced by middle class white folk or the poor class white folk or upper class white folk? What is driving the mulatto base?
Well, the white Americans. And they are usually produced from that lower middle class woman that worked with the white folks in their little business, in their homes, or in other areas where they are so-called integrated and given the responsibility to be managers in their homes, in some of their businesses on the local level. For instance, the lady that's sitting at the desk as the receptionist clerk has more clout many times than the administrative assistant when it comes to dealing with the boss. Wow. Because she knows she's not going to get promoted, but old Susan Q, that's the administrative assistant to the boss, has to do anything she is told to do. If they don't hire that person, she's not going to do it, even though she knows he's most qualified or she is most qualified.
We're going to come back and deal with it. We're going to deal with the DNA of mulattoes and what they think and why they are different than Africans that are original Africans.
Now, you don't want me to talk about that now because I'm going to tell you the truth on it. I have all kind of data on that. You don't want to hear that, and it'll hurt your heart, Mr. Socrates.
No, I want to hear it, and I think the world needs to hear it, and I think I want you to take a DNA test because I'm looking at you, and I believe there's something in you that either came out of this middle class whites or this lower class white, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it even came out of the upper class white.
Well, I know where it came from, but I'm not going to talk about it until we get into it. I know, man. It's embarrassing, Doc.
We're going to have to do DNA. Listen, our time is up. I'm sorry, but Doc and Sock comes on Fridays at 5 o'clock, and we are on again on Tuesdays. When are we on again?
We're on Tuesdays.
Tuesday at 6.
Yes, 6.
We are on Tuesdays at 6.
And 7, too. 6 and 7
6 and 7 on Tuesday.
We do it again at the latter part of that hour from 6 to 7, and then from 7 or 7:15 to 8:15 to 8:30, where we together again most times. Sometimes it's a long deal. Sometimes we both do it. And then again on Thursday and again on Friday where we just do the Doc and Sock show.
We are seeking sponsors for this show. A lot of people have asked if we would syndicate our show on other radio stations throughout this country, and we are willing to do that. And so we have some stations that are going to come online next year. And so we're looking for sponsors for that. Now, the demand is so great until we're going to see if we can bring you Doc and Sock each and every day, 5 days a week, starting the first of the year, because we have tremendous demand for this show. Now, Doc, our time has come and gone, and there's so much work to be done until I look forward to seeing you again on Tuesday.
Well, I intend to be here, sir. I intend to be here, ready to go as usual, and I'm going to start, Mr. Socrates, giving so much specific information until one going to have a fifth of whiskey out of sight to drink on during the commercial, because it's going to be piercing, factual.
I look forward to it, Doc. You have been watching Doc and Sock produced right here in Jackson, Mississippi at the We Believe Digital Network. We want y'all to stay safe out there, and good night.
Looking for the hottest content in the city of Jackson and surrounding areas? Check out WeBelieveDigital.com. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. We Believe Digital Podcast is here for all your podcasting needs.